Okay, we're going live. So hello to everyone who's tuning in on Facebook or on YouTube today. My name is Julia Correa, and I work with Water for People. I've been with the organization for about a year and a half, and I will be moderating today's discussion on sanitation work. So for those who don't know, we're celebrating World Toilet Day today, November 19th. And I'm really excited to be joined by the speakers who I have here on the screen, dive a little bit deeper into our sanitation work. So it's in our name, like water is. So some folks don't know as much about our sanitation work, and you might even be wondering, what is sanitation and what are we talking about when we say it? So hopefully today you all will be able to leave this town hall with a love of sanitation and a better understanding of our work. So before we get started, just to go over a few housekeeping things, and we know that people will be joining throughout the broadcast as they log in. But you can be watching on either YouTube or Facebook and using those chat features throughout the town hall. So thank you to those who submitted your questions beforehand. And we'll be taking questions at the very end of the town hall in our Q&A session. But feel free to pick your question at the town hall if one comes up as we have one of our speakers sharing. So, and we have folks who are monitoring those chat as well. So if you have any technical difficulties, feel free to reach out. And keep that open because we'll be sharing some links as folks are talking regarding our work and different things that you can read maybe after the town hall. So with that, we're going to get started. I know it's a bit prompt here, so we'll have people join as we go. But to start us off here, I'm going to share a PowerPoint for us to follow along, and then I'll pass it off as we get started. Great, okay. So welcome again for everyone. I've seen a couple other people join since we started. So just want to say welcome again to everyone who's joining. We know we have a great mix of folks who are new to our work and also folks who have been part of the organization or supporting our work for many years. So we're just excited to have you all join today to celebrate World Toilet Day. So just to briefly go over this one more time while we have everyone joining, this is our agenda. So we're going to hear from our first speaker, Christine, to give a little bit of a background in terms of who we are as an organization, Water for People at the high level, to give an introduction for those who might be newer to our work. Then we're going to pass it off to Tom and Pat for Sanitation 101 to highlight some of our initiatives that are really exciting in the realm of sanitation, and also to give you a bit better idea of what the scope is of the issue. And then the bulk of the time towards the end of our call will be focused on Q&A. So like I said at the beginning, but for those who maybe hadn't joined yet, we thank you those who have submitted questions beforehand, and we'll also be taking questions throughout the duration of the town hall. So if you want to go ahead and chat a question in the Facebook chat or on YouTube, we'll try to get to as many of those questions as we can at the end of our time. So to start us off, like I said, I'm really excited to be joined by a couple of my colleagues and also a longtime volunteer here on the call. And the first person that I will pass it off is to Christine Mizulu, who serves as our Director of Donor Engagement here at Water for People. And she just passed her second month mark at the organization, so we're so excited that she can join us here on the call. As some of you might have seen on Instagram, I asked all of our speakers to share where the most unique toilet is that they've ever used. And I will say, selfishly, I got such a good kick out of all of their answers. And so I'm excited to be able to share them on our town hall today. So for Christine, she shared that the most unique toilet she ever used wasn't actually much of a toilet, that are categorized as the most humorous or unusual toilet that you might use. So she shared that she was staying in a yurt in Colorado, and it was dark outside, and you could hear, and I'm sure hear very loudly, a hunting pack of coyotes moving outside. And so instead of risking it and going outside into the darkness, the hunting coyotes, she opted for a red Solo cup. So I think that's where the humorous part comes in. And I think the best part too is that her family will never let her down for that year experience. So definitely unique and also a humorous toilet to start us off. And so with that, I will pass it over to Christine.
Thanks so much, Julia. I'm happy to offer a little bit of levity. And so, of course, she mentioned my family is not going to forgive me for that trip. And they may never forgive me now that I've actually shared it publicly. So, but I'm really excited to have joined the Water for People team. As Julia mentioned, I've been here just a little bit more than 2 months, and the more that I learn about the work at the organization, the more I'm just so impressed. And some of the things that really strike me are some of the things that I'm going to share with you today. And it's really about the statistics behind the work. So if we could move to the next slide, please. 1 in 3 people don't have access to clean water. And just to kind of put that in perspective, that's 2.1 billion people, more than the combined populations of the Western Hemisphere and Europe. And actually, the situation, it gets worse when we talk about sanitation. And when we say sanitation, what we're referring to are toilets, latrines, a safe place to go to the bathroom. Only 1 in 2 people, and that's over 4 billion people, don't have access to a dignified toilet. And that is more than half of us walking around on this planet. And so, while the effects of the global water crisis can be felt on a daily basis, a day-to-day basis, there's also this generational aspect that I want to highlight here for us. Because when we talk about the cycle of poverty, what we're referring to really is the systemic marginalization of communities who lack access to fundamental rights like access to clean water or a toilet in their home. And that means that, as you can see, they have a harder time accessing opportunities for education, economic mobility, and healthcare. So without clean, accessible water, the cycle of poverty, it just perpetually continues. A lack of access to water can mean hours spent seeking water sources. And many times, not only are these water sources distant, they're unsafe because they're unprotected. So it puts the person at risk, many times women and girls. And that dirty water, it takes hours to get. It takes hours out of a person's day. Can also still, because it's dirty water, can cause poor hygiene and waterborne illness. Poor health and hygiene mean missed school and work. Missed school and work mean a lack of job opportunities and low earnings. And then this leads to a lack of economic development, and that cycle of poverty just perpetuates itself. So really, water continues to be at the foundation of how communities and individuals really reach their potential. So the global water crisis, it's not a new issue, and decades of work and billions of dollars have been spent and dedicated to trying to break the global cycle of poverty through access to water. Unfortunately, there have been patterns in the sector, and this slide sort of illustrates that, especially in the area of water and sanitation. It's been detrimental because when development work doesn't include the voices, leadership, and the buy-in of the community, it's largely unsuccessful in the long term. And so what we've seen in the past is that water pumps are installed, there's a success celebrated, the pumps may break without money or anybody trained to fix them. And then we're back sort of at the starting place again, where the community is again without water. And so if you want to move to the next slide, for a long time, this was a model that Water for People's, that was behind Water for People's work. And in 2011, we had an epiphany. The entire model needed to change. And what was really needed was a change in the way that we do our work. And something that hadn't been done up until that point was this system strengthening approach that would also help sustain the needed infrastructure. And so Water for People's Everyone Forever model was born. And what it is a sustainable solution to end the global water and sanitation crisis. So what we do is we commit to a community for years, not months, partnering with a district. And a district operates very similarly to a county in the US, until every single community, every household, every school and health center has access to high quality water, sanitation, and hygiene services. And to make sure that these services are sustainable, our work is also really focused on the relationship building, local advocacy, and capacity building, so that the communities where we work can really manage their own progress long after we're gone. And the forever piece just means that the water supplies are protected, managing institutions are functional and funded, and sanitation services are available, and communities are aid independent.
Thanks so much, Christine. That was a great overview. And I think for a good reminder for folks who are more familiar with our work, but also a great introduction for those who are newer. So I'm going to formally introduce the other speakers that we have today. I know I mentioned their names earlier, but like I said, selfishly excited to share everyone's toilet stories. So the first person I'm going to introduce is Tom Wildman. Tom is our Senior Program Manager for Sanitation here at Water for People. And he shared that despite having using many unique toilets in his life, the choice was fairly easy to answer this question. The first tiger worm toilet he used in the Dominican Republic sparked his lifelong love, or also obsession, with worms that eat poop. And so I think, Tom, that you probably picked the right profession then, if that's going to be guiding that decision. And then our second speaker that I'm going to introduce is Patrick Mccann. Pat is one of our longtime volunteers and also a previous board chair here for Water for People. Pat is also a retired CEO of Weston Solutions and has been supporting Water for People since 2003. So Pat, I might pick on you later to help share kind of that evolution and the story of your involvement with Water for People. So a fun fact is he's visited all of our programs, or all of the regions, excuse me, where we work. That would be across Latin America, Africa, and India, which is in Asia. And currently serves as an advisor on certain sanitation projects. So Pat works very closely with Tom. So for the most unique toilet, Pat shared that his was in Oahu, Hawaii. And so on the North Shore of Oahu, there was a roadside restaurant, and the bathroom was in a building behind the restaurant. And he's not sure why, but the toilet was on an elevated platform with 10 steps that you had to walk up on every side. And so maybe that's where the term throne comes from, and hopefully it felt somewhat regal to be using that bathroom when you were there. So now I'm going to pass it off to Tom and Pat, who are going to go a little bit deeper into what exactly our work at Water for People looks like in terms of sanitation and some of the really cool, innovative solutions that we are practicing right
now. Hi, everyone. So the global sanitation crisis that we're dealing with, it's much bigger in scope than the global water crisis. So while you've got about 2.1 billion people in the world who don't have access to safely managed water services, that number is 4.5 billion people in the world who don't have access to safe sanitation services. So that's more than 1 in 2 people globally. So it's a pretty shocking number. And why is it so big? Well, there's a big challenge around it. One is that there's actually shockingly little choice for affordable, high quality toilets in a lot of countries. If you are a poor person in a low income country, it's often very difficult to find something that is both high quality and is less than $500 or $600. It's almost nearly impossible to get a loan or the ability to take out credit to get a toilet for your house. And of course, once you have a toilet in your house, that's only one part of the solution. There are almost no sewer systems in the majority of the countries that we work in. So once a latrine pit or a septic tank gets filled up, that needs to be emptied. So there's a whole service chain that needs to be established there. So here at Water for People, we really take a systems-based approach to addressing this issue. And specifically, we work with both public and private sector actors to develop market systems that can provide safe and affordable solutions for families. And our overall goal is really to end this sanitation crisis within our children's lifetimes. And we believe that the best way to get families access to safe sanitation products and services is not by kind of giving away toilets or building toilets for a small sort of group of people, but like I said, to really develop market systems that can provide affordable options at a very large scale. So when we say a markets-based approach, what that really means is we want market systems composed of both public and private actors to really have efficient systems that can really deliver affordable products at a large scale at prices that all different income groups can really afford. And we do that in rural areas, we do that in small towns, and we do that in very large, densely populated urban areas as well. So to give you a sense of why we work in this way, or what this can kind of look like, the problem that we see in most areas where we work is that there is a huge affordability gap for most people when it comes to sanitation products like toilets or sanitation services. A large number of people simply can't afford the market price for a product or service. So that's this huge gap here sort of on the left that we see. So we sort of attack this problem from two different angles. So we work on the supply side to basically drive down costs. Now, that can be design innovation, that can be increasing production scale and efficiency of production, more efficient distribution strategies, and also looking at how we can leverage public finance and really get the public sector to invest in more affordable solutions for people. We also attack it from the demand side also. A lot of that's just around demand creation or behavior change in terms of helping people to understand why it's so important to make investment in high quality sanitation services. Making sure that available sanitation products and services are aspirational as well. And easing the procurement and installation process, which may be something that you don't really think about, but in many places, it is very difficult to buy a toilet or to get someone to empty your septic tank. You may have to go to 6 or 7 or 8 different shops to get all the necessary components that you need, and then pay for the delivery, and then find someone who can actually build it and install it for you. So we really try to create sort of a one-stop shop almost mentality or model around that, where you can go to one place and have it delivered and installed for you. And then the last one on there is looking at affordable financing options, helping people get access to affordable credit, the ability to pay in installments for products and services, etc. So ultimately, we want to eliminate that gap. And once that gap is eliminated, of course, that benefits everyone, not just people who we worked with in a 3 or 4 year time period. So our target within our current sanitation strategy, which ends next year in 2021, is to reach 2 million people through sanitation initiatives at scale. So our sanitation initiatives, if you can go to the next slide, Julia, span the entire sanitation service chain. So you have to think, in most of the countries where we work in, there are very few sewer systems. So there's an entire service chain that kind of needs to be established, right? And that starts at the household level here on the left with sort of household toilet facilities, looking at a system of actors who can empty these pits when they're full and safely transport them to a treatment site, which comes next. And ideally, we look to then reuse and recycle the treated waste. So this is the entire chain that we're dealing with. So as you can see, it requires a very large ecosystem of actors that all work in a complementary manner. And this slide here sort of shows the breadth of Water for People's engagement across the 9 countries where we work. So we engage strategically in different parts of that sanitation service chain in all the countries where we work. And that's kind of what these check marks represent. So as you can see, we don't work in every part of the chain in every country, but we work in the parts that we feel have had the biggest kind of market failures or where the biggest gaps exist to try to overcome those obstacles. So now we're just going to take you through a few of our, I think, more interesting sanitation initiatives, or the ones that are delivering the biggest impact at scale. And that'll show you a little bit of, it'll give you a bit of a taste of sort of what they look like across that chain. So a lot of the work starts with household mobilization. And that's really working with households to help them understand the importance of investing in safe sanitation for their families and helping them to kind of mobilize resources, sometimes to construct their own toilet, sometimes to go and purchase one through the market. So that's really a mixture of building awareness, behavior change, and technical assistance. We also work on access to credit for sanitation. So access to finance is a major obstacle for a lot of households to investing in a safe toilet. And in some places, it's nearly impossible to get a loan or to pay on credit. Microfinance institutions exist, but they typically give loans for income generating activities. So we've developed partnerships with microfinance institutions to develop sanitation-specific loan products so that people can take out a loan to build a toilet, build facilities for their family, and then pay that back over time at a reasonable interest rate. We also work with hardware stores to offer installment payments on these types of things also. So speaking of toilets, at the household level, this is probably one of our most impactful initiatives, and that's working with Sato pans. So Sato pan is this kind of blue oval-shaped object that you see in the middle of this floor slab here. It is a plastic pan that gets installed in the floor slab of a latrine or a pour flush toilet. And it's kind of difficult to see here, but it has sort of a flap where that hole is with a counterweight on it. So when you flush it with a cup of water, that flap opens and the waste goes down, and then it closes afterwards, keeps out flies and insects. There's almost zero smell. And you now have a safe barrier between that pit with the waste and yourself. And the reason that we're so excited about this is this retails for between $5 and $8 in most countries where we work. So it's a very affordable way to upgrade your toilet. This was developed by Lixil. They're a Japanese corporation, the world's largest toilet manufacturer. We started testing this in some countries many years back. We helped to introduce manufacturing of this in Kampala, Uganda. And in 2019, I believe around 41,000 of these were sold in Uganda. And this year it's on track to be even higher sales. And we've now expanded this to Rwanda, Malawi, and Peru also. So this is something that we're really excited about. Very lightweight product, easy to distribute, ship. So it's had a huge impact. Now, of course, once toilets fill up, they need to be emptied. So we've put a lot of work into developing business models to actually provide pit emptying services. So as I said earlier, many families and places where we work live in areas without sewer connections. There's not likely to be sewer connections anytime soon. So our programs in Uganda and Malawi have been working to kind of incubate and support and grow enterprise models to provide these services. And there's nearly 50 now that are sort of independent, financially viable enterprises that we don't really provide any support to. And an instrumental part of helping them get started up was this pump that you see this man here using. That's the Gulper, which is a very low cost manual desludging device. which sort of spawned all of these businesses, where we're now working on version 4.0 of this, which is actually going to be much more hygienic than the one that you see. And we think it's going to decrease their sort of operational costs significantly as well. And then finally, this waste needs to be treated. So if you can go to the next slide, Julia. We've done quite a bit of work around decentralized waste treatment plants, but what we wanted to highlight here was something really interesting happening in Uganda, which is the reuse of the treated waste. So in Kampala, which is the capital city in Uganda, we work quite closely with the National Water and Sewerage Corporation. Now, they have a large-scale treatment plant in Kampala to treat sewage waste and septage. And we have actually set up a production facility within their treatment plant that takes the processed waste and turns it into briquettes. And these are sort of an alternative to traditional wood charcoal. So they're composed of 40% fecal sludge and some agricultural waste. And we've got production now up to around 4 metric tons a week. And we're now looking at selling these within the market and use those revenues to feed back into providing more sanitation services in Kampala. And we've been working very closely with Pat on thinking through how do we really grow this business and have it be self-sustaining. And I'll hand over to Pat to explain that work.
Thanks, Tom. Just in my time with Water for People, I've seen lots of different approaches to extract value from sludge. Fertilizer, soldier flies, Tom's favorite, worms, or fuel products. And as Tom said, the basic idea here is to carbonize the sludge to make a charcoal-like product to capture the energy value. And I'd have to say I'm really impressed with the team on the ground in Uganda. This is kind of a pivot for them from what they have traditionally done. Here, how can they start up and run a business? But they've been really great in terms of working with the local government partners. They've gotten space at the treatment plant to set up our operations. They've hired people. They've gotten, selling the product in the community. So it's a lot of progress have been made. But as Tom said, sanitation is mostly driven by market-based approaches. And I think one conclusion that Water for People came to was, well, that's great, but NGOs and government don't really come at it with a business mindset to start from. So Water for People reached out to me and Steve Rosenthal, who's a great donor and a really successful entrepreneur, to try to bring in that perspective as advisors. And mostly what we do is we ask lots of questions and suggestions based on our experience. But what I like about this is briquettes is a really big idea. And the big idea is, could you really make money on treating the sludge and then use the profits to subsidize or maybe even make pit emptying free? Now, wow, if you could do that, that would be transformational. The whole idea is to make it less expensive. If you could make it free, that would be amazing. So I just love being part of this project. It's not an easy one, but it has a big aspirational goal, and I think it has a shot. But this has been a typical business startup from my perspective, with some fits and starts along the way. Everything from ordering some equipment in China at the beginning of the Corona shutdown and having to wait from that to typical kind of issues that you have getting your technology up and running and to scale. And the team's had a big focus on the technology and how we treat it. But my comments are really going to be more on the business aspects of it. And kind of what Steve and I have been pushing for is, do we really understand the value proposition to our customers? So I think 2 of the biggest markets so far have been households for cooking. That's what these honeycombs you see on the slide there are used for, or in some cases. And then also for the chicken farmers for heating. Do we understand how this compares to the other products they're using, the pros and cons of it, what it'll take to sell it? So it's just not a typical focus of NGOs or governments in the past, but it's not rocket science. They can with some help figure that out. Something interesting that we learned along the way that I thought was kind of, just my business sense kind of jumped up. In Kampala, the population is going up quite a bit. And as the population goes up, some people use charcoal, some people use wood for heating and cooking. Well, it's harder to find wood and it's harder to get charcoal. So the prices are going up. So does that make our product more competitive? I think it does. How far will charcoal prices go up, and how much will that make our, technology and our approach more successful? So kind of interesting to watch. Another thing that we found out is we believe that the briquettes made from the treatment sludge burn longer than the traditional briquettes. And this is a big benefit when you're cooking. So you don't have to keep, firing it and adding fuel and tending the fire. Well, that's great. But would buyers be willing to pay more for that? Sounds like a benefit. Well, at least they'd prefer this over the traditional. But we're really pushing to see if we could understand that better and understand what the pricing implications and the marketing implications and how we would sell it are. So that's the kind of exciting things, I think, on the briquette side. On the pit emptying, recently Tom has led some great discussions about, what he talked about earlier. How do we dramatically drive down the costs? And, if you think about somebody doing pit emptying, their cost is composed of a number of different things, right? There's a cost of selling each household. You got to find people who will buy your service. There's a cost of going to their house to collecting the waste and pumping the waste. But then there's also a cost of collecting the money from the buyer. So as we started to think about how we could dramatically drive down costs for pit emptying, we started thinking about, not just working on the technology side of things, but how can we work on route density? So could we add a transfer truck that will be in certain parishes or neighborhoods on certain days that would encourage people to get their pits emptied at a certain time, and that would drive down costs to the entrepreneurs? One idea was, could we kind of package the services in a bid, much like in the US, some communities do with solid waste management. Instead of having 4 suppliers in your neighborhood, they kind of bundle them up, they go out for bid, and then the solid waste management company doesn't have to worry about selling it or collecting it. It all comes through the township. They still have to write a proposal and have to compete, but theoretically, the route should be denser and you should have lower costs. So I think it's just in general helping Tom and the team brainstorm what are ways that we could dramatically drive down costs. And I think, sometimes you hear people talk about what will it take to get to scale. And to me, there's 2 challenges. Can we dramatically drive down costs and increase coverage? But how can we also increase demand? And if we could make those 2 things happen, that's where I think skyrocketing coverage could really take place. And I think there's progress made, but we could make a lot more. So it's been great to stay engaged with Water for People and see the potential that this initiative could have. So appreciate the opportunity to be part of this. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Pat. And that's, I think what Pat just described there really highlights something fundamental to our approach to sanitation, which is in all these initiatives, we're constantly refining and iterating our approach also. So it's not that we have kind of one recipe that we're following everywhere, where we're constantly kind of refining these models and always trying to get them more efficient and that they reach more people. So this slide here just kind of demonstrates how we move our ideas along, let's say. So everything that we do fits into one of 4 different tanks. So the first one is the idea testing tank. So when we first come up with a new idea, we initially try it out on a very small scale, and our intention is always to fail fast. If it is not going to work, we want to know very quickly, and we kill it off. If it does not die in the idea testing tank, it advances to the market testing tank. And that's really where we take it to market. And we see if consumers are interested in it, if it is indeed affordable, but if it's a financially viable model as well. If it can pass out of there, it goes on to our scale testing tank. And that's where we see if we kind of back off step back a little bit, will businesses continue investing in this? Will more businesses enter the market system? Will government support the regulatory framework to support these approaches? And if it passes out of that, it goes into the scale tank. And that's where we feel that we have a scalable model. Now, that does not mean that we have reached scale. So I think we're at a really interesting point in water for people and sanitation, where we have several models that we feel we have the evidence that they are scalable models. They're reaching large numbers of people. And I think the next big challenge is really around how do you multiply that impact and really scale it by a factor of 10 or 100 or a 1,000. So it's a really exciting challenge that we're at now. And yeah, that's a very rapid fire kind of overview of over 50 sanitation initiatives in 9 countries. Those are just a few highlights. And I think we're going to open it up to some Q&A now. Is that right, Julia?
Tom and Pat, thank you so much. I like how you said lightning round, because I do think we covered a lot in a short amount of time, but hopefully that left people with a better understanding of just how big the scope is when we're talking about our sanitation work and all the things that play into that. So like Tom said, we're going to transition into our Q&A time. And so thank you again to everyone who submitted questions beforehand. Feel free to comment questions on Facebook or on YouTube as well, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. So I'll bring on all our speakers today. And before we get started on the Q&A, I just wanted to highlight how many people we have around the world celebrating World Toilet Day. So I'll highlight a few of these comments that we've gotten from Canada. We have people tuning in from Uganda, Honduras, Nicaragua, and then moving more domestically, Florida and Colorado. So a huge thank you to everyone who's tuning in and helping us celebrate World Toilet Day. Really excited to have everyone here. So we received a ton of great questions ahead of time, and so I'll try to get to as many as possible during this time today. I think that one thing that we're going to start off with, and something that I know came up during all of our speakers' presentations, is really the impact of COVID-19. So we've seen this question not just in our sanitation work, but really across our programming. People are really interested to know how COVID has impacted our work, the access that people have to these services, and also the safety of our own staff. So this is one of the questions that we received. So how have existing WASH initiatives, one, been impacted by COVID-19, but also how have we helped our communities in spite of COVID-19? So I think I'll pass this off to Tom to start. Okay.
Sure. Yeah. So I think it had a huge impact on our teams and our activities due to reduced ability to travel to the field for our own staff. But if you think about the sustainability of water and sanitation systems, the ability of people to kind of pay their water bill or to pay for services has been massively impacted by COVID-19 also, as people cannot go to work as they did previously. We've seen a lot of reactions to that. In some countries, we've seen sort of public utilities sort of forgiving water bills or subsidizing them. In terms of our own initiatives, obviously a huge increase around hand washing and hand washing with soap, which has always been a part of our programming, but we've really kind of ramped that up. But I think more than anything, it's made us realize that kind of our whole approach to sustainable systems is the right one. Because if people don't have a tap that reliably gives them water every day, or they don't have the ability to wash their hands, or they don't have the sanitary facilities to keep things, to maintain hygiene, you can't even begin to think about how to manage something like COVID-19.
Yeah, Tom, I love that answer. And I think really early on, we had a blog written by our Chief Programs Officer, Mark Dewey, that highlighted that this isn't going to be the last of pandemics or epidemics, and that we want these communities to be resilient, not just now, but into the future as well. And so I think we really continue to lean into what we do, because we do want the services to be around and for these communities to be resilient into the future, facing other public health crises. So the next person I'm actually going to pass this to is Christine. I think that even domestically, in terms of our engagement with folks here in the US or supporters in other countries, COVID also has impacted the awareness around hygiene, hand washing, and sanitation. So just wanted to get your take too about how we've seen almost, I think folks have said on our end, the silver lining of COVID as well.
Yeah, and Julia, I think that's a great way to describe it. If there were a silver lining in the midst of this pandemic, it really has been that it's created more awareness around the importance of water and of clean water and hygiene. And so, we, I think, are creating some greater understanding with a broader community of supporters, broader than we ever have before. And we had a wonderful article that we were included in a couple of months ago in the New York Times that talked just about this, about charities to really support during this time of COVID. And we were included among those charities because of the work that we had been doing, we are doing, and we will be doing in this area. And I would say that it just becomes even that much more relevant as you're watching the news. And I'm sure many of our viewers today have been seeing the impact of the recent hurricanes, Hurricane Eta. And my understanding in talking with a colleague this morning is there may be another hurricane headed in the same direction. And so not only are they dealing with really catastrophic damage, but they're also dealing with a lack of clean water in the midst of COVID. So I think really it just underscores the importance of the work that we do and the importance for the need for support of that work.
Absolutely. Thanks, Christine.
Yeah.
So another thing that I wanted to focus on, we had a couple questions in this vein, is not only to how our work shifts, but also how different communities have been affected by COVID. And I think that we see this comparison a lot in our work between those who are living in rural areas versus urban areas. And so Tom, I think you touched a little bit about this in terms of how for sanitation, our market-based approaches have to look different in these different contexts. So what's some of those innovations that you can dive into that really highlight how our approach needs to be different across different contexts?
Sure. So when we're working in densely populated urban areas, you really have to think about that entire sanitation service chain, pit emptying services, decentralized treatment. People tend to live in very densely populated areas where there's not a lot of space. A lot of people don't even have or own their own toilet and cannot because they're a renter, or maybe they don't have the physical space to actually build one, so they use communal toilets, etc. So looking at those services to sort of manage that waste in a really timely and efficient manner is really important. And so usually in those urban areas, you are looking at household level sanitation, pit emptying and transport. We even do kind of transfer stations for the waste, decentralized treatments, and then possibly reuse. Rural areas, it's not always the same. I'd say it's a larger focus on household sanitation, and sometimes it's just not economically viable to even set up that entire service chain, or there's just not enough kind of numbers of people to have it make sense. And so in those cases, we really try to look at kind of in situ options. So that can be a dual pit option where you sort of switch between pits, and when you're not using one, then the other one dries out. We work with tiger worm toilets, which I really love, which virtually never need to be emptied. They're worms that eat the poo and take care of about 80 to 85% of the solid waste, actually. So there's different options that we look at there, but it's probably not all elements of that chain. And in rural areas, lots of times we're starting, I'd say, really on just demand generation to get people to build their first toilet. Sometimes open defecation can be quite common. So a lot of it starts with really intensive kind of behavior change to even get people to kind of go onto that first rung of the sanitation ladder.
Great, thank you. And Pat, I know a lot of these questions with sanitation do touch on the kind of market-based business approach. So if you want to add in on any of those, please let me know.
Sure.
Cool. So Tom, the next one I'm going to pass off, and Pat, feel free to add as well, is you just mentioned open defecation practices. So I know that ties into a lot of the work we do within sanitation, is really educating and raising awareness in terms of the health hazards and also environmental hazards of open defecation in the communities where we work. So we had this question, is what sanitation hurdle is the single largest difficulty? I know it's a very big way to state it, but that we face in overcoming those unsanitary defecation practices and that we see in the different countries where we work.
Only one. I think a lot of it is around political will. A lot of the time with sanitation. You know, I think it's easier to generate or mobilize investment for water service provision from the public sector than it is for sanitation services. First of all, I don't think it's the vote getter that water is generally. So I think the second biggest challenge is it's not just about building a wastewater treatment plant. It is that very complex ecosystem of actors to service that whole chain that all work together in a complementary manner. And it requires working with multitudes of people and different groups, from the engineering level to the business level to the regulatory and policy level. And it's just something that inherently, I think, takes time.
I just add in there, Tom, I think, that what role can the private sector take? I remember years ago, I was in India and we visited a kind of a toilet sales business where the guy had multiple models, had kind of the low cost, the medium cost, and the high end. And then he had established basically salespeople that would go village to village and try to begin selling the toilets. And then I think Water for People got involved with helping people to finance. How could they take out a loan for the $600 or $700 it would cost to put in whatever model they happen to select? And it was kind of another interesting story on that trip. I remember we were in a village and I had to use the bathroom. So I asked, somebody, is there a bathroom I can use? And they asked, some woman if I could use her toilet. And she said, sure. And I'm in there and I come out a few minutes later and she's waiting for me at the door and she had her payment book. She wanted to show to me that she was up to date on her loan payments. I thought that wasn't the reason I was there, but you can just see in the village, what a difference it will make, and the pride that she had that, she now had a toilet for her family. She was paying for it and she owned it. So I think kind of there is a private sector role, but there's also, Water for People role there.
Great. Thank you, Pat. That's such a great addition. And Christine, I'm going to pass this one off to you to close it out. Because I think while Tom mentioned the kind of the appeal of sanitation work versus water in terms of government buy-in, that political will, I think we also see that in terms of public awareness within the communities that we volunteer with here, that we have as supporters, as donors, as partners. And so from your point of view, I think what is the single largest difficulty or the biggest barrier in terms of just raising that awareness about the importance of our sanitation work?
Gosh, I think it's a simple issue that's also incredibly complex. And so I think, through opportunities like this, this opportunity, something like a town hall like this, where we kind of do maybe not the deepest dive, but a deeper dive than what most people may have an opportunity to learn about in this area, makes a huge difference. Because I think as you get in and you start to learn about the statistics, but also the impact that can be had, I think really energizes, I think, our supporters.
Thank you. Totally
Yeah.
agree. Okay, so I'm going to try to get to a few more questions so we have some time for closing. And so I think that this is one that I was just thinking when you were sharing about the market-based approach, but also the difference between those rural and urban communities, is we have this question about examples of how sanitation solutions are developed in relation to other structures and systems. And so I think about this, when we're talking about pit emptying, if there isn't a road network to be able to access the communities so that their pit can be emptied, that even if we developed that system and that business to be able to empty pits, there are still going to be households and communities that will be able to access that service. And so I think that within our water work, within our sanitation work, we have to be looking at the larger ecosystem. And I know you touched on that, Tom. Just wanted to see if you had anything you wanted to add on this specific question.
Yeah, I mean, the physical access, like you just mentioned, that's definitely a key one. I think another thing that we try to look at, especially when we're working with sanitation entrepreneurs, is how we can sort of bundle sanitation services with other types of business opportunities also. So I think the really obvious example there is looking at sort of a solid waste management or like a trash pickup, right? So, and that's what's been developed in one of our programs in Rwanda, where the entrepreneur who empties pits and then runs the waste treatment plant also does the trash pickup there too. And I think that's important because it uses largely the same equipment and sort of vehicles. So it doesn't require a lot more investment. Both of them get managed by the municipality. The margins on sanitation are not always great in terms of sort of profitability. So it's really important to look at how we can help entrepreneurs who, we think are delivering very large social returns, get the financial returns to actually make it a viable business for them. So I think that's really important to look at. And then just generally, what I've sort of seen personally is once you get reliable water systems in places, the demand for sanitation tends to kind of come along with that. Once people have running water in their house, people want, a nice toilet and sort of washing facilities, and to be able to enjoy that. So I think that water and sanitation, especially the household level, it's really critical of both.
Great, thank you. Okay, and so we've had a couple questions come in through the chat as well, so I wanted to highlight one from Don. I've had the pleasure of meeting Don. He's a past board chair of Water for People in Canada, but I also think this brings up a really great point, and I think we touch upon this and it comes up in our water work as well about how disproportionately women and girls are often affected by lack of access to services. And so I want to see more questions after this, but I would love to hear from folks about, we use that word dignified, we use the word having dignity and choice in the access that we have. So how does that relate to women and girls and also menstrual hygiene management? Do you want to take a stab again?
Yeah, we have this discussion a lot, actually. This is a great question because recently there have been some large-scale evaluations of sort of water and sanitation programs showing, let's say, tenuous links between kind of like health outcomes and access to sanitation. And this has really been the discussion is you've got to look beyond just kind of health impacts here or having a viable sanitation business, right? Dignity and safety are two huge outcomes. Many people do not have access to a toilet that's got privacy. This is a huge safety risk, particularly for women. So things like dignity, I think, are extremely important to kind of consider and to even measure. And this is why on really all of our kind of market-based approaches, the consumer and what they need and what's kind of aspirational, I think, for them is extremely important. I mean, that's really what drives all of this. And it's really about the way that I like to explain our sanitation programming is really no one should be too poor to be able to have a safe and dignified toilet, right? The system should really cater to that for everyone. And dignity is really front and center on that, definitely.
I would just, another story, I guess, as a father of two daughters, this one hit me pretty hard, but I remember we were in West Bengal, India, a while back and visited a school, and the head of the school was showing us some data, and believe it or not, the school didn't have toilets until Water for People's involvement. And he showed the attendance, boys versus girls, and you could see about sixth grade, suddenly the girls all disappeared. And then they added the toilets, and suddenly the boys and the girls were in equal participation. I'm like, really? Something as basic as toilet, is blocking girls' education. So it is that basic. And having access to sanitation is really important for children of all kinds.
Yes, totally agree. And I think that goes back to, Christine, the slide that you were showing on the pathways to poverty. Because if you're having students, and specifically girls, who are either dropping out or having much lower attendance rates from such a young age, then of course those are critical times for their learning and their own development. And so I think that we see a lot of that continuation of which people don't have access to those services at home and at school. And then what does that affect them in terms of when they're ready to join the workforce and things like that. And so see such a link right between all of those things. And so I totally agree with that kind of sentiment that it seems like a basic need, and one that though basic makes such a big impact in terms of their ability to engage with that education. So we are coming close to time, and so I'm gonna try to keep your answers short to maybe like 30 seconds. But I was really struck by one of these questions that was submitted that really highlighted that a lot of us, specifically in the US or in different countries with sewerage system, don't oftentimes think about what happens after you flush. And I think that a lot of when we talk about our sanitation work is debunking those kind of expectations that in the communities where we work, their sanitation system looks just like ours. And so I think all of us, whether you're working in the sector, you're a volunteer, you're a supporter of Water for People, or you're new to this work, I think that hopefully there's something that we can all take from what we've learned today to be able to help those people kind of think what happens beyond the flush. So if you had to give like one tidbit of advice for how we can do that, I'll give you each 30 seconds to go. Who wants to start?
I guess I'll start. Just keeping it short. I think the challenge is out of sight, out of mind, and how do you get it to be visible? This is a great example. World Toilet Day is kind of a funny thing, but get to be able to talk about it. If you're in the engineering business, you may talk about it more often than if you're in some retail business. But make it visible so it's not out of sight. But then I'd encourage people to take another step. And one of the things that I like to do, people say, "Oh, you still involved with that water thing?" And I kind of tell them about my story. But I think the point is, I try to send them a link. So don't just get involved, maybe become a donor. So, most of the time they'll say, "Wow, I looked at that website. That was really cool stuff." Well, hopefully they'll take the next step and become more of an active supporter and a donor. So that's my 30-second answer.
I'm going to jump in and piggyback because he gave me a great entree into my answer, which is a little broader, but obviously it's, obviously attending an event like this, but this is being recorded. So I would encourage all our viewers to share the link, to share the information and share the word and the understanding about the work that needs to be done. And certainly including us as a charity of choice in your charitable giving, it gives us the means to continue the work. And there's other really great sort of deeper dive ways that you can get involved with Water for People, whether it's our events or if you are a water or sanitation professional, we have also desk study opportunities that you can contact us about, but awareness is really key. So help us generate awareness about the issue and the work.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, in terms of showing how important wastewater management is, It's getting people to understand, I think, the complexity of what actually goes into it and the extremely high costs that go into it as well, which I don't think anybody really sees, because I think in most places, your sewage bill is kind of on your water bill and you never really think about it. But the complexities of that system and how in most places, I think what we consider kind of business as usual approaches just don't cut it.
Thank you all so much. Those were such poignant, but also short and sweet and to the point, which I appreciate because we are unfortunately at time. And so I apologize if you submitted a question and we didn't get to it today. But just know that we, like Pat and I think Phoebe, who are lovely moderators of the chat, who are behind the scenes, have posted that these will be living on our YouTube and Facebook pages. So we'll be able to access those comments in the future if there's a question that we didn't get to today. I just want to say a huge thank you to our speakers, to everyone who is on the line joining. I think that for me, I have a huge interest in learning more and engaging more with our sanitation work, and I hope that you're able to leave this town hall with a better understanding. And if you're looking for another way to celebrate World Toilet Day, maybe your new favorite holiday after today, we have a partnership with Joe Gatto from Impractical Jokers, and if we have Pat and Phoebe can comment that in the chat. If you donate today, we actually have a signed movie script from all 4 of the Impractical Jokers. If you donate via that link, you can be entered into a chance to win. I think this is the first time I've ever had anything signed in my possession, and so it can be in your possession too if you're able to donate through that link that is being commented now. So again, thank you so much. I know we're a little bit over, but a huge statement of gratitude for everyone who's joined, and hopefully you all can share your unique toilet stories with those in your life to help celebrate today. So thank you all for joining, and we'll see you soon.